Good morning, ladies. Welcome back to day 2 of Reset the Airways. I am your host, Tynisha Woolley, and today's episode is all about courage, but not from a place of fear or performance, but really from a place of being soul led and aligned with the woman that you are becoming. So, as you are headed into work this Tuesday morning, I hope that you settle in with us and get ready to just enjoy a really great conversation about fear. So, today's theme, going from fear based living to faith led living, is something that I have lived through, I'm going through, and in some areas have overcome. And my, I guess, latest fear obstacle as a leader and a coach, more so in this arena now, is being afraid of being visible and walking out my purpose. And I know that sounds strange for a coach, but that really has been my latest hurdle that I am actively trying to overcome as you guys are all tuning in to this week-long series. And so you all can actually be a part of me walking in this freedom. Because what I didn't fully realize before is that during this time of being held hostage by this fear of not being visible, that fear was actually in the driver's seat of my life and actually steering my decisions and deciding my opportunities for either growth or stagnation. So I don't know if you've ever been in that space, but if you can relate to being in a space of fear based living or leadership, you know that sometimes it doesn't always show up like panic mode, like complete chaos. Sometimes it can look more subtle, like striving to be perfect or over functioning or even avoiding responsibilities. So, in my journey, and as I am still walking through it, I am having to unlearn my place of fear and replace it with faith. Ultimately, as a foundation, my faith in God, faith in myself, faith in my voice, faith in my purpose that I believe that God has given me. And I am excited because I also believe that today's guest embodies that shift as well. But before we get to our amazing guest today, I want to set the framework of why we are attacking fear today as a collective of women who are fearfully and wonderfully made for more. Because at the root of naming our fears, we also going to give a voice to a lot of high achieving women who have not been able to before say out loud that we've learned to lead from fear. And because there hasn't really been a voice to that concern, it becomes hidden on the inside. And it manifests itself in many different types of fear, like fear of failure. And what if I'm afraid to take a risk because I know it will take me out of my comfort zone? The fear of being found out. What if someone knew that I actually struggle with imposter syndrome? What about the fear of being enough? You know, how can I lead a team of people when I don't even feel qualified? Or there's also the fear of being too much. You know, I feel like I can't bring my whole self to this leadership position or to the current space that I'm in my life because parts of me may actually offend someone else. And the problem with fear based living and leadership is that it might look like success because we're achieving our outcomes and checking off our to do list. But on the inside, it really feels like survival. It's draining. And we want every day to be Friday so that we can have an escape for the weekend. So I know if that's you, if you resonate with currently being in a space where fear is driving your journey, just raise your hands, put it in the comments so that we can all start to support each other now. And we're going to start with today's episode of talking about what it means to rewire how we live and lead and move from a space of fear to faith. And before we jump in, I want us to ground ourselves with this question as we go through this conversation. So grab your journal, write this down. What is fear currently directing my where is fear currently directing my decisions? Where is fear currently directing my decisions? Without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our guest expert today, Dr. Kimberly Flanders. So, Dr. Kimberly Flanders is a higher education professional with over 15 years of experience growing and leading high performing teams and developing leaders. As a leader, she understands that striving to reflect God's love, cultivating a reputation of excellence, and seeking wise counsel can positively impact those within her sphere of influence, professionally and personally. As a first generation college graduate, Dr. Kimberly Flanders understands how education changes lives and has devoted her career to assisting others in assessing and attaining post secondary education. By integrating her love of God, leadership experience, and education focus into a leadership development program, Dr. Flanders hopes to build God's kingdom by empowering other women to demonstrate his love through leadership. Dr. Flanders earned a BA in psychology from Mercer University, a master's of education in community agency counseling from Auburn University, and a PhD in educational leadership from Mercer University. Though originally from Carrollton, Georgia, Dr. Flanders resides in Dallas, Texas, with her husband Mike, her daughter Makeda, and their dog Kiki. So, ladies, that is her well-deserved professional bio. And to me personally, Dr. Flanders is a mentor, someone I admire, and have experienced her effectively coaching high impact teams, building incredible yet fun cultures to work in, and developing women to lead with courage from the inside out. So help me welcome Dr. Flanders.
Hi.
Welcome, Dr. Flanders, to Reset the Airwaves.
Thank you for having me.
I am so happy you're here because I couldn't think of a better person to discuss going from going from fear to faith led leadership. And so I want to dive in and just help the audience get to know you a little bit better with a personal question. And previously, we talked about there were two defining moments that shaped your leadership journey. So,
Mhm.
can you share with us those moments and also what made you challenge those fears?
Sure. So, immediately out of grad school, I was offered a director position and I wasn't ready. I was new as a professional and certainly new as a leader. And so it sounded good, it looked good. I thought it would be, a great springboard into my career. And so I said yes. Um, and in saying yes, I was saying yes to leading the organization that I had done my practicum and internship with. So I'm saying yes to leading the people who just last semester were training me on the processes and teaching me everything. And now I'm the boss. I'm leading people who, old enough to be my mother or grandmother in some instances. And so, again, I wasn't ready, but also they weren't ready. And so I remember specifically an example where I was actually called into HR because the office manager complained that I didn't appreciate the role and was condescending because I had asked her to make a copy. And so, again, this is 17 years ago. What really happened, I don't remember. They may not remember, who knows. But we all know that there are always three sides to every story. And so I think that could there have been, maybe. But I also recognize now that there may have been some projections onto me as well because of the differences. And so from that experience, though, rather than being now a seasoned leader and understanding that there are so many other factors to people's experiences, but I internalized, okay, I can't delegate. I can't ask people to do things because if I do that, then I am not being appreciative and I am making them feel less than. And so, um, for years, I did everything myself and, I take care of it. I got it. And it took situations where I couldn't do it on myself, either because of time, either because I was not in the office and literally had to ask other people to help get the job done, but also just understanding from my team that they were starting to feel unappreciated, and not utilized and not trusted because I wasn't delegating and asking them to assist, and in many cases to do the role that they were hired to do. And so, in recognizing that, I, have started to be released from my fear of delegating, and I'm definitely more comfortable doing that. The second one, and clearly everyone or no one, however we want to speak today, I'm a perfectionist. Maybe recovering, I don't know, depends on the day. Um, but in doing that and being that, I definitely want to be seen as knowledgeable and competent. But early in my career here in Dallas, instead of it showing up healthily as seeking to be knowledgeable and competent, I wanted to know everything. And I didn't want to be in a space where I had to say, I don't know. And I had a boss who was great. And so she would always ask me these questions. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I don't have the answer. And so I'm hyping myself up and becoming anxious to always be ready to hopefully answer a question, but not because I didn't know the questions that would be asked. And I was new to the field in general. So there were things that there was no way I could know at that point. And so finally we had a conversation and she was like, what is it? What's going on? And I said, I just don't like telling you I don't know. And she said, well, I didn't put that on you. That's not my
Mhm.
expectation. You did that yourself. And so I had to sit with that and recognize that I was putting an expectation on myself to basically be omniscient and clairvoyant at the same time for this job. And nobody had asked me to do that. And so once I accepted and released that, then I could stand into being knowledgeable and competent, but that means knowing what I don't know, knowing where to find the information, knowing who to ask, and being okay with that.
Wow. So many nuggets in that revelation. And I think I relate to that on a couple different levels. My first leadership position was also kind of a trial by fire. I feel like similar situation of where I was in charge of overseeing people who were older than me. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to figure it out. So I definitely can relate to that. And I think that a lot of women will be able to relate to that when they first come into leadership. And maybe we'll speak to the root of where some of that fear comes from because you feel like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm just really each day trying to figure it out.
Mhm.
So, to that, I believe that there are levels to leadership. And a couple of those levels are that there is a difference between leadership and management.
Mhm.
So, do you agree or disagree that there's a difference between those two roles? And if you do, can you share with us what your definition is of a leader and of a manager?
Oh, absolutely. So yes, there is certainly a difference between the two. Um, I believe that a manager is someone who is focused on the outcome. So a process, a task, the responsibility, and just getting the job done and making sure it's done, within the time frame, budget, what have you, whatever the parameters are. Whereas a leader may be responsible for managing a project similarly, but they're also focused on developing the people, developing the organization, making sure that we're moving forward in whatever direction the organization needs to go and bringing people along with them.
I love that. So it sounds like a leader has to be a little bit of a manager as well.
Mhm.
Kind of mixing those roles and pulling in the best parts of that role into one. And so, with that, I think that that leads to a lot of high achieving women falling into that performance category and trying to balance all of these different tasks and needs from the people on their team to the organization. So, can you talk a little bit about what fear based living looks like in the life of a high achieving woman, whether it's at work or at home?
Mhm. So, and I will say, though I believe that a good leader is also a good manager may not be true, depending on the level of, organization. And so they're in some situations, not necessarily one and the same, but we will hope so.
Mm-hmm.
But then hopefully the leader has recognized and identified others who have that management gift to support them to get them to the next level. But what does it look like? Well, just, at work, when given a new task or responsibility for me, um, I am really good at procrastinating. And so I will wait looking for this perfect time, this perfect block of 1 or 2 hours that I think that I need in order to start to create this thing that I've been assigned. But because I am also potentially living from fear and wanting to make sure that I'm always proving my value to the organization, I've committed myself to so many other departments or projects that there is no time on the calendar in order to focus on this new project. So then when I do finally sit down and start to work on it, I am thinking of all of these grand ideas. And so I'm overthinking, I'm over planning, I'm, playing with Planner and playing with a project management tool and trying to come up with a spreadsheet and all these wonderful things for the work, but not really doing the work. And then I procrastinate even more because now I've overwhelmed myself with all of the grand ideas that I think that I have to put forth in order to show that I need to remain in the organization. And so then as the deadline approaches, now the stress and the fear and the urgency comes. And so now there are the late nights, maybe even no sleeping or, missing other meetings to get this thing done. And it gets done and it's probably pretty good. And so then it is submitted and it is celebrated, but because I'm so tired and, coming down from all of the anxiety that I can't even truly appreciate the recognition because I just can't comprehend because I need to go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then at home, it can look like a chaotic space because of all of the time and energy that's poured out at work. It can look like relationships that are strained, again, because all of the energy is going to the work. So when you come home, they may feel like they come second or third, and you've poured out everything, or I've poured out everything at work, and I have nothing else to give to them at home. Um, it could look like, it could look lonely because you don't always know who you can be vulnerable with, and you may not have been able to keep relationships strong because again, you're so focused on work. And so it can look a number of ways.
Hmm. Thank you for giving us so many different ways because I think that it can show up subtly
Hmm.
in those ways that you just mentioned. But something really that struck a chord with me that you said is proving value, right, to the organization or in your family, whatever role you have there. And that I'm so passionate about that and just working with women in really discovering their purpose because I feel like once you're anchored in your purpose, then you really have a place to come back to compare, or not to compare, but to a place of identity and a
Hmm.
place where you can come back to get aligned with, okay, is this what God has for me in this different area of my life? Am I out of align, and am I misaligned because I'm having fear-based thoughts, or I'm trying to find my value in this? And so I think those are important questions to ask and are indicators that yes, I'm living from a fear-based area in this life versus faith-led. So thank you for that. So next question is, what are some common ways fear disguises itself in leadership?
Mm. So three come to mind, but I know that there are more. One I would say is micromanaging, because going back to that value and that belief that everything has to be perfect and you don't trust that other people can do the job. And so you have to make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed, even though you have other people in the organization. Um, so I think, and then just this belief that whatever you put forward, it reflects who you are as a person, and not necessarily just reflecting the work that you do. I would add, the perfectionism. So everything has to be perfect if it's me, because this is how I show that I am valuable, and this is how you perceive me. And if I'm not perfect, then you won't like me, or you won't continue to employ me or promote me. And then lastly, the people pleasing. And I think they all kind of tie together, because at the end of the day, it's about operating from a way to get positive feedback from others versus operating from a space of I do good work, um, and I put forward maybe even my best, which is fine, but my value, and I'm not dependent on your response to be okay with the work that I did, versus knowing, yeah, it's good. If you like it, great. If you don't, there might be something that we can talk through for me to improve it, or it may just not be what you wanted, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. And it helps to not take it so personal when you
Mhm.
when you do that. So
Well,
I
love
believe
yourself.
that the antidote to fear is courage, and I define courage as faith and action. So can you tell us, what is one myth about courage that keeps women from taking bold steps?
I'll try to stick to one. So I think one myth about courage is that um, courageous people are independent and not vulnerable. Like they're so strong and they're not afraid. Versus the reality is that they probably are afraid, and that's okay. But being courageous is about moving through that fear anyway. Um, and so when we have this idea that we have to be so independent, and we don't reach out, we don't connect to others, we don't seek help, we don't seek that wise counsel, then we make a space where we are maybe even setting these expectations ourselves, and we don't have that soundboard to share, to say, actually, I hear you, but maybe have you considered this way? Or, I can support you. That's a great idea. Or, what do you need? And so it's just that idea that I have to do it alone. And so then it creates this loneliness. And if we just embrace the village that we could have, then I think that many of us, me, could move so much farther along.
So since you are there in that space, can you give us one specific example of a shift that a woman can take to move towards acting in courage?
Um, with that example, saying, telling someone, and being intentional about it, speaking boldly about it. And even if the first time you can't be bold, then okay, then I need to do it again. And you say it and you share it until you feel comfortable sharing it. One example, so with my, you see, the founder of Queen of Considerations, um, the idea was gifted to me by God last year. And so I was like, okay, there are these um, truths and principles that are found in the book of Esther about leadership development. And it's so good and it's so great. And I think it's, so helpful. And I could see it throughout my career and I wanted to share it. But then I was like, okay, I'm quiet. Okay. Nobody wants to hear. Maybe I'm just, and so I was like, And then I just mentioned it to my mom and she was like, oh yeah, that's great. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I can come home and we'll do it at the church. And so I'm thinking 10, 15, maybe even 20 women to just share a little information. But because I reached out to her and shared it with her, she shared it with like so many people. We had about 75 people in attendance. She had gone all out. She brought in her network. So there was, someone taking pictures and someone who catered it, and the decorations were beautiful. And, she brought in someone to make banners. And so the event became this beautiful experience when I was just thinking of meeting in a room. But because I spoke it and was vulnerable enough to share that fear, that she helped it become something so much more than I could ever imagine.
And that's such a powerful example of how just taking that little step of courage, and you get to tap into other people's strengths and their networks, and then it becomes something much more than you imagined. And I think that sometimes as high achieving women, we often think that we have to do it alone or we have to do it on our own, and that's just not the case. There are so many people around us who want to support us, but they can't support us because they don't know. And so I definitely encourage all the women who are watching, if there's something that is in your heart that God has given you, something that you've wanted to do, and even if you don't have all of the steps, because I think sometimes that also fear hinders us in that way, thinking that we have to have it all together or know all the answers. Even if you just have that piece of an idea, I encourage you to find somebody to talk talk to about the idea and just bounce it off, because you never know what door that can open. So just take that step and just ask a question. So that's a beautiful, beautiful example, and definitely want to hear more about queenly considerations. So at the end, I want you to tell us a little bit more about that project so that we can help support you. Another question that I have is, we've talked about what are some of the signs of living in fear and trying to move forward and walking in a place of faith. But sometimes fear is hard to unlearn. So, why do you think fear is hard to unlearn once it's wired into our thoughts?
Well, honestly, I think most things are hard to unlearn once we've learned it. I think fear in particular, just because the story that we tell ourselves based on it, even if it's not true, even if we know that it's not true, it's habitual to fall back on. Even like I know that I shouldn't, start scrolling on Instagram first thing in the morning, but because the habit when I pick up my phone is to click on that button, that happens. And so, I think it it just becomes difficult because that has been a coping mechanism. And who knows, maybe at some point in our career or life that it was beneficial and it was necessary. But if we're not able to recognize when a strategy is now a hindrance versus a help, then I think that is part of the reason why it can be difficult to unlearn.
I agree. And I think part of helping or walking in that direction of unlearning is really acknowledging the fear based thoughts that we're having and then learning how to replace them.
Hmm.
So, this is a question that I'm going to ask you because I know that you are the queen of reframing.
Yes, there we go.
Yes. So I want you to help us give us some practical steps of how we can reframe those negative thoughts or the inner critic in our head from and go from living in fear and thinking in fear to really walking in a space of faith?
Sure. So I think we have to be mindful of the words that we are saying to ourselves. So if we are saying, I should do something, or I must do this, or I have to, then recognizing that that is what, they call stinking thinking. And so reframing that to maybe I get to, or I would like to, or this is what I would like to see here. And so framing it not around what you think externally it should be, but really focusing on what the opportunity could be, um, where you could grow, if you could grow, stretch, who else you could impact, and what the benefit would be. So just really reframing those thoughts so that then the behaviors follow.
I love that because I think that a lot of times when we get into that space of fear, we're not thinking about how this can grow us. And sometimes, we might assume that the enemy or whoever has placed us in those positions, but oftentimes it's God who has placed us in that position because he knows that this is a tender area. And in order to get to our next level and where he wants to take us, he's got to work that out in us. So I would also encourage you, if you're in that space, to just be curious and to ask God, God, how do you want me to grow? What lesson should I be learning in this space? Because also too, something that I have determined in my own journey is that fear also has the same feeling as excitement. So sometimes maybe we may not be feeling fear, but it could be a sense of excitement for the journey that we're going into. So, really just taking the time to think about, okay, what does this mean? Let me, collect myself and let me just really tune in to where I know that God is taking me and the goals that I want to achieve.
Love that.
So I have a few lightning round quick fire questions that I am calling. And so these questions are meant to be light, fun, short answers, whatever comes to the top of your head. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So the first question is, what is your favorite scripture when fear tries to come for you?
Okay. So I would go to Esther 4, 13, and 14. And this is where Esther and Mordecai are talking about his request for her to go to the king to save the Jews. Um, so he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?
I love that. And I think that a lot of us probably often quote only that last sentence, for such a time as this, which is a beautiful statement in itself. But
Mhm.
to hear that full scripture, it's so much more rich in that scripture. So I know it's supposed to be lightning round, but I really think that that speaks to kind of the journey of leadership. So can you talk a little bit about what that full scripture means?
Yes. So, and what it means to me, or what it means biblically
What it means to you.
to me. Okay. Because I was like, biblically, okay. So to me, it means that,
That's a
we,
whole nother show.
right. Like I wasn't ready for that one, but I'll try. Um, So to me, it means that we've all been given gifts, one or more, but we have to use them. And so if we are not intentional about recognizing when is our time to step up, and it doesn't have to be this huge thing. Like if it's a woman crying in the bathroom and you're there to just say, hey, are you okay? Like that is stepping up, because that could be that in that moment, your question could change the trajectory of her life. And so it just reminds me that when we are faced with choices, and sometimes very difficult choices, we have to make the decision to act, and we are blessed to do that. And so we can't squander that opportunity. And if we don't, then someone else will come and there will be deliverance in another way, but it will harm our legacy and that of our posterity if we don't move when we're supposed to.
Love it. So move when you're just supposed to move.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to God's voice.
Yes.
Oh, I
And
love that.
obey.
Yes. Oh, that is key. And obey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's one thing faith has helped you do that fear never has?
Well, Faith helped me to draft the guidebook and to reach out and to just start this journey to not just impact people in my sphere at work, but to spread it out to others who are drawn to it.
And who is a courageous woman that you admire?
Mama.
A word that describes you in your boldest season.
Courageous.
Okay. And then our final question that I'm asking all of our guests is, what does it mean to rise right now for you in this season?
So for me, and I think it is kind of in alignment with what you were talking about in your intro. I am an introvert. I am, definitely someone who doesn't mind and prefers being behind the scenes and supporting others, and pushing them forward. And so for me, rising means to stop hiding, to stop hiding behind this sense of humbleness and humility, which we should have, but I'm really good at taking things to the extreme. And so also recognizing that I do have gifts that need to be shared with others, and I was given them to share them, so not hoarding them, and just really moving in this new updated purpose, because it grows and changes as we grow and change. And so just using those gifts, and I was earlier reading about the gifts of the talents, and I want to have them and not squander them, and be able to hear him say, well done.
Well, this is definitely your first step, and you are well on your way to using your gifts and talents, and for women all over the world, I'm going to say world,
Okay,
to be
I
able
received that. It's going to be international.
yes. And so, speaking of that, share with us what exactly is Queenly Considerations and what do you have coming up?
So, Queenly Considerations is based on principles that come to me out of the book of Esther with regards to leadership. And currently there are 10, but the more I read it and as I'm studying and planning, like more come out. I'm like, I can't just keep adding, but it's just so rich. And so just thinking about the verse, we've heard it at almost every Women's Day and Women's Conference theme, and we use it, but that book, and even though it's only 10 chapters, there's so much packed into it. And it's just amazing to me. And so I want to share that, but also to empower women to recognize that, yes, we want to walk in excellence and we should walk in excellence, but that doesn't negate the responsibility that we have to also walk in God's love. And if we lead using his love and his guidance, then our impact is going to be so great. And then just think about who we can draw to him and to build his kingdom through what we do in the marketplace, by just being the leader that we are. And just like, the book of Esther, God is never mentioned in the book, but you see him throughout. And so when we're at work, I'm not saying that, you got to go in and say, praise the Lord, saints, everybody. Like, that is not what I'm saying. But the life that we lead should be that testimony and that light for someone else to see the God in you and to draw them.
Absolutely. And I will be the first to sign up for your workshops that are coming and
Yes.
your guidebook, right?
Yes.
So can you tell us?
Yes. So the workshops, they're coming. So follow me. My daughter, who's 15, said I'm not supposed to say this, so I'm going to say it. Follow me on IG, Kimberly Flanders PhD, and Facebook at Kimberly Flanders. So, like, the book is in draft. It's with the editor right now, so I don't have a timeline for its release. And I'm currently doing some focus groups for the workshops, but as soon as I have, the date set for any intensive that is in person or any sessions that will be online, that information will be shared on my socials.
Wonderful. So y'all make sure you go and you follow Dr. Flanders on IG and Facebook so that y'all can stay up on the latest updates, because I'm telling you, the revelations that she has gotten from Esther are going to be juicy. And so you want to make sure that you are in on that. So, Dr. Flanders, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today on day 2 of resetting the airways. I want to thank you for your courage, for sharing your story, and just for your wisdom as a leader who has, who's very well rounded, I will say. And so I think that you have helped us all see that leading from faith does not mean being never afraid. It just means that fear will not have the final say.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You are absolutely welcome. So we look forward to having you back soon. When everything comes back, we'll bring you back.
Let me know.
Okay. So there you have it, ladies. I hope that you have enjoyed that amazing conversation about faith and fear, and just how you can begin to walk it out in your own journey. And if this conversation has stirred something in you today, if it's caused you to really think like, hey, I really do feel like I have a lot of fear-based things going on in my life, I want to invite you to meet me tonight at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on my YouTube channel for a deep dive about this topic. And the episode is going to be titled The Art of Unlearning Fear-Based Living. And so in this episode, we are going to be talking about some tools that we talked about today. We're going to walk through a short self-assessment, and we're just going to share some practical ways of how to rewire fear-based patterns and build from a place of soul-led leadership and a place that really aligns and honors your purpose and your path that you're moving into. So join me on my YouTube channel, PurposelyMADELifeTV. I want you to bring your journal. I want you to bring your tea. But most importantly, I want you to bring your whole self, and let's get into releasing this fear. And if you are ready to feel like you need a little bit more support in your leadership and healing journey, I want you to also feel free to book a clarity call with me so that we can begin to unpack this on a very personal level. It's free. And so it's just a conversation between me and you, and we can really unpack it on a one-on-one level. And so I have had a great time hanging out with you guys today. I want to invite you to join us for the rest of the week. Tomorrow we'll be talking about healing in motion, and we will have our guest expert will be a licensed psychotherapist. So you want to make sure that you are joining in on tomorrow's show. And until then, I want you to remember that fear may have had a chapter in your life, but it doesn't get to write the whole book. So I'll see you ladies tonight so we can dig in more.